So you have a book on Sharia, and those are the things that that book is discussing. It is not discussing beating women, not at all. It's not discussing bombings going off. It's discussing, this is a book in Arabic, by the way. Another chapter about is for the interest of Sharia to ensure that the land and the environment is protected from any possible destruction from the making of mankind. Quite interesting. This is a book that deals with Sharia. Another thing about a higher intent of Sharia is to ensure that the community living in any specific space is united despite its diversity. So justice, security, safety, peace, independence of the judiciary, unity, protection of the environment. This is a book on Sharia in Arabic, published in the Middle East. Then you come to another book also published in Arabic, and I say that's intentionally, it's published in the Arab book. So it's not what I'm going to present different from what is really taught about Sharia in these places. I mean, it's a big book, so I choose specific statements. The Sharia is built on ensuring that people live with no iPhones, that people live with the principle of dialogue, forgiveness, and respect of the other. That in order to understand the mindset, the Quranic mindset about Sharia, you have to always look for what makes people's life much easy, less rigid, and less difficult. You always look for means to ensure that people's needs are met and people's freedoms are protected. Another chapter, where there is interest, there is Sharia. An interest here is defined by a very well-known scholar of Islam called Ibn Qayyim. Ibn Qayyim, for those of you who are Muslims, know him very well, a very well-known Imam. He said that Sharia mabniyatun is built on mercy, justice, and compassion. فَإِن نُزِعَ أَيُّ أَمْرٍ, anything that lacks any of these three components is not Sharia. A statement that students of Sharia learn and study and go through, and maybe the first sentence they study in Sharia departments. Again, Sharia is built on mercy, justice, and compassion. And any matter that lacks any of these three components is not Sharia binding. This becomes sort of a lens for you, the general public, to use to judge whether something is Sharia or not Sharia binding, is acceptable or not acceptable by the rules of Sharia. If it does not contribute to mercy, to compassion, and to justice, it is not Sharia binding. Also, I want to add to the table a few other things before we really delve into or decide to dive into our PowerPoint. What really went wrong in the Muslim world to have contributed to the mess we in the Muslim world live in? This is my own understanding of history. At one point, there were Muslim scholars, ulama, all over the Arab and Muslim world, studying texts freely, interpreting the texts freely, and making the texts very relevant to the lives of people. and this happened where the Islamic empire was not centralized. People had the freedom to do that all over the Arab and Muslim world. And we had so many schools of thought that were so free to do anything and everything they want to do. They were free to criticize, they were free to evaluate the text, they were ready to judge, to retract, sit around the table and debate issues freely, however painful those issues were. The Islamic empire became so much centralized at one point. And with that centralization, so many of those Muslim scholars lost their independence. That's number one. Number two, much later on, the largest Islamic seminary in the Muslim world, or in the Arab world, Al-Azhar University, moved from being completely an independent institution into becoming nationalized institution controlled by the government. So many of the ulama lost their independence. So imagine now what we are dealing with. An empire, centralized power that forced those ulama to lose their independence. And instead of publishing something new, be critical in their thinking, they start realizing on what was written 1,000 years ago, what was written 500 years ago. That's what they call in writings taqleed, blind imitation to what was. Not allowing people to do ijtihad, try their best to struggle to understand the mindset of the text and make that text become relevant to the lives of people. And people were told in that age that we have nothing we need to study. We already did that over the course of 1,200 years. Why do we have to do that again? Not only that, those who came up with the new ideas ended up in trouble with the government, the centralized government, or those who are controlling those governments locally or regionally. So depriving them of their very freedom to think, to evaluate, to study, to come up with the new ideas. So they moved from what is known in the Islamic history as ijtihad, that gave birth to an amazing civilization that was inclusive to Jews, to Christians, to pluralism, where science flourished, where mathematics was not seen as, or reasoning as, anti-religion. They saw reasoning as natural partner to faith. Quite interesting. To exactly the opposite. From critical thinking, you would be rewarded for it. So the Caliph, the Abbasides, used to do this. He encouraged the people to be so much critical in their thinking, so much open to thinking. The Caliph would give the weight of any book in gold as a reward to that person, whether you are writing the book or translating the book. So people became rich by translating books from other languages into Arabic, or from writing books. Whether it was 1 pound or 20 pounds, you end up having 20 pounds of gold. Imagine what that did. All of that ended. So put all of that together. Centralized power, less freedom to think critically, and nationalization of Islamic seminaries. Add to that, number 4, you have these colonial powers, the militaries, that came and colonized the Muslim world. Number one thing they did, number one, not number 2, number 3. Number 1 was they actually literally destroyed seminaries and the intellectual madrasa system that existed at the time. And the madrasa system there is not like the madrasa system now in some of these countries. In these madrasa systems there, people studied mathematics and algebra, people studied philosophy, people studied logic, people studied every kind of science you can ever think about. Women were a part of those madrasas. So destroy these madrasas and colleges and seminaries. And number 2, kill the teachers, the shuyukh, the ulama. What did that do? It created a vacuum throughout Muslim lands where there is a lot of hunger for education, but less people who can feed into that hunger because they are not there. create a huge vacuum that we have been suffering from for the last 100 some years. What did that do? It created what I call underground, militarized Islamic education. The goal of those educators was not to study Islam as much as what can we do to drive the colonials out or to refix what is within ourselves. And in the presence or with the lack of teachers who could guide, people started turning the scriptures on their own without guiding principles. That is what we're trying to do and how we have been trying to do in the last 20-some years in the Muslim world or in Muslim communities around the world. How can we reestablish those guidelines? How can we fill the gap so that we can reconnect with our tradition in a way that will be what it used to be in terms of openness, critical thinking, readiness to ask the tough questions and move forward. At the end of that era, we ended up with Taliban. We ended up with so many experiences in the Muslim world of people who understand Sharia in their own way. Or sometimes Islamic movements that have some kind of sympathy for Islam. No one can undermine at least their love for their faith. But one would easily criticize their comprehensive understanding of the text, comprehensive understanding of the history of that text, and the lack of understanding of how that text could become relevant. Put all of that together, that's the mess we're in. So lack of understanding from the outside, lack of understanding and application from the inside. So Sharia becomes an explosive term. So when I was asked on CNN, Imam Hendi, a legislation was just passed recently in Pakistan, in one of the provinces of Pakistan, where that province was allowed to enforce Sharia. What do you think? I said, absolutely not. Why? Do you hate Sharia? I said, no, I love Sharia. I really love Sharia. But not the Sharia of that province. If they're going to enforce the Sharia of Taliban, of course I'm not interested in it. But for me, that is not Sharia. You see where I'm coming from? So what I'm trying to say here is, if we are talking about the Sharia of the Al-Shabaab of Somalia, or those who call themselves in Egypt the Salafi jihadists or the jihadist Salafists, with whom I met when I was recently in Egypt, who say things beyond what you can imagine in the name of Sharia. So according to them, women in Egypt, not only they cannot run for the president, they can't even run for Majlis al-Sha'b, for the parliament of Egypt. Quite interesting. So according to them, Christians cannot build churches. And they call that Sharia, and they're willing to do anything and everything in the name of Sharia. So of course I don't want that Sharia to be applied. You see the complexity here? However, I said, well, if you mean Turkey, yes, I want Sharia to be enforced. If we are talking about people like Jamal al-Banna, if we are talking about people like Fahmi Huwaidi, if we are talking about people like Ghanouchi of Tunisia, of course I want Sharia to be enforced. But what is in that Sharia? This is what we will be discussing for the rest of the night. Any question about this history? And I only take 2 questions because we really need to move forward. Yes, sir. Speak loud. I'm really very old. You see, you are really driving us into the details. The question here is, can a Muslim woman be a Sharia, a politician? This is what I will discuss this now. Sharia is a set of paradigms and does not deal with the questions that you ask. There's something called fiqh, jurisprudence. So here when you have Islamic jurisprudence, jurisprudence deals with specific questions built on Sharia. The term Sharia is more of paradigms, set of values, set of lenses through which we see and with which we function and we judge. So the question is, by fiqh rules, can a woman be a politician? Well, this is a question we can discuss, and we have 5 examples we will discuss at the end of the presentation, just to satisfy your question. I know you will be sitting like on fire. Yes, I said that in Egypt at Al-Azhar University 2 weeks ago. I said that on CBC, Egyptian TV station. Muslim women can be anything Muslim women want to be, including presidents of countries. Yes, and nothing would prevent them, according to my understanding of Sharia, from doing so. Now, of course, there are people who say, Imam Hendi, what are you talking about? They can be judges, they can be professors, they can be ministers, but they cannot hold what they call wilaya amma, sort of the highest position in the society. It's an opinion that has historically existed, but one can easily debate. And what I'm trying to do here is to make these discussions become a part of the public discourse so that we can discuss the questions and ask the questions and maybe come up with a new set of rules that may differ from how some people at one point interpreted them. Yes? But to make, as an imam, I say yes. Yes, sir. And we'll end with that question.
Jack Ruzenko, and what you said about the historically independent ulama, I'd like you to comment on what you feel the hopes are to have that today, and politically independent ulama, and what you think needs to happen for that to come about.
Thank you. Well, to start with, like Al-Azhar University used to have an endowment that gave the ulama the independence to think freely. I am not receiving my salary from the head or the governor of Egypt in those years. What is happening now I think in all Arab countries, not in all Muslim countries, in all Arab countries, I think all the imams are government employees paid by the government. I think that has got to stop. Because the moment the government gives you your money to pay the bills at the end of the month, the moment they start controlling you. I want that to go away. That's number one. Number two, we need to establish seminaries that give freedom to critical thinking, however painful and however difficult that process may be. Number three, I think there needs to be an open engagement between Muslim scholars in the West and Muslim scholars in the East. Why am I saying so? Because in the West, and I think I might be wrong, I think I'm right, but I might be wrong, that in the West we have the environment that encourages us to think freely, with absolutely no reservation and no hesitation. In so many Eastern societies, people don't have that freedom. And I say this because from my experience, as I travel through the Muslim world and the Arab world, people always say, well, Imam, you can say that in America, we cannot say it here in 1, 2, 3. And my question is, why not? The answer is, well, I will be killed, or I'll lose my job, or I will be demonized in the newspaper. So for me, I come back to America. In America, I can say, yes, a woman can be a president of Turkey and a president of Egypt, and no one will do anything to me. But can you do that from Alexandria, Egypt, or from Saudi Arabia? Can you do that from the city of Mecca, stand up on the Eid, on Eid, and do a Eid sermon, like on Fridays is coming, and say, I declare from Mecca that women have the right. My God. Not only, I don't know what will happen to that guy. He will be in trouble. He will be in trouble. Let's speak the truth. Let's just speak the truth. It's not an easy thing to do. So we need that honest engagement to give support, at least moral, not financial, moral support to those people, but also give them the ability to engage with another school of thought that they might not have known it even exists. The third thing, we need to use social media. Imagine if we set up Facebook and Skype and all of these, where you can chat and educate and empower people from overseas. What's the time now?
It's like 7:10.
You did not answer the question.
It's after 7:05. I would be still.
7:09.
7:09. Let's take a break. Let's take a break now. We will come back after the break. Break only 7 minutes, yeah?
7 minutes, 7:20. It's 7:20.
Okay, 7:20. Please come back on time. I'm a swimmer, by the way. By the dictates of Sharia, I'm a swimmer. Okay? Yes, you can swim in Sharia. Okay. Okay. Now, is the word Sharia, or does the word Sharia refer to law, the way we understand law, like in the United States of America, or any country, as a matter of fact? And I dare to say no. In America, when you think of law, what do you think of? You think of constitutional law, financial law, business law, international law. You don't think of what I'm about to be discussing. And therefore, I always say that the translation that people offer for the word Sharia is wrong. It is not Islamic law, as you will find out. Sharia is, as I said to the question, is a set of paradigms, a set of values that are not considered law. They contribute to law, but they are not equal to law. Keep that in mind as we move forward. And people mix between these two terms, Sharia and fiqh, where fiqh is jurisprudence and Sharia is these principles and paradigms I am talking about, and we'll be discussing them in the coming hour or so. Sometimes they are used exchangeably, these two terms, Sharia and fiqh, to mean those paradigms and actually practices and moral concerns. Is Islam equal to the term Sharia, or is Sharia equal to the term Islam? Are these two different terms? In the writings of so many Muslims, the word Sharia is equal to Islam. So when people say, I want to live Sharia, they mean, I want to live Islam. When people say, I want to live Islam, they mean, I want to live Sharia. What does that mean? Exactly what I'm about to talk about. So Sharia and Islam, in so many writings in Muslim tradition, refer to the articles of faith, the 6 articles of faith, the 5 pillars of Islam. So the creed of Islam is a part of Sharia. The creed of Islam is a part of Sharia. And therefore, how can a creed be law? You see where I'm coming from? When I said earlier, Sharia is not law. Sharia includes creed, faith, theology, aqidah in Arabic. That's not law. And therefore, the translation law is not really accurate. So the creed of Islam is a part of Sharia. The 5 pillars of Islam is a part of Sharia. So when people pass laws in the United States of America to ban Sharia, so should you want to ban me from praying 5 times a day? Doesn't that violate the American Constitution? Freedom of religion. The American Constitution gives me the right to pray 5 times a day. And you are legislating against your own Constitution? You see where I'm coming from? Because they don't know the terms. They are referring to their own imaginations of what Sharia really is. This is why so many Muslims feel offended when people talk against Sharia. This is what comes to the minds of so many Muslims. Aqidah and Ibadah. Articles of faith and pillars of Islam. Number 3, a way of life. In other words, how do you translate one's theology into practice? By living the scriptures and by keeping the commandments. So keeping the commandments of the scripture, translating that faith into practice, is a part of Sharia. What does that mean? When I read in my theology that تخلقوا بأخلاق الله, adopt God's morals, if you will. Like what? God is Rahman, is merciful. You have to adopt that quality and become merciful. God is Ghafoor, is forgiving. Adopt that quality of forgiveness and become forgiving. That's what this really means. Keeping the commandments, there's so many of those commandments in Islam, such as thou must not murder, or look with lust at your neighbor's spouse, or so on and so forth. Living those ethical values derived from that theology and that spirituality is called Sharia. Now, what are those values that Sharia espouses and become the center teachings of Sharia? Those are the values. Number 1 value is Tawheed, the oneness of God, maintaining the belief that there is one God. What does that mean in practice in Sharia? If there's one God, there is one humanity. Despite its diversity, we have to work in harmony. Out of that oneness of God comes number 1, Hurriya, freedom. A very important value in Sharia. Nothing can be called Sharia binding if it does not espouse this concept of freedom. Responsibility. With the freedom comes responsibility. You're not free to do anything and everything you want to do. You are free, but to a limit that does not violate someone else's borders. So freedom, responsibility, and after responsibility comes justice. Adl. We mentioned this in a different seminar, where Adl here is mentioned in terms of politics of justice and economics of equity. Adl, one of the attributes of God being al-Adl, but one of the main definitions of law, that no law can be binding or can be superior if it does not enforce justice in every way, shape, and form. So with the freedom comes responsibility, but both freedom and responsibility are crowned with justice and adl. Again, keep that in mind, because the question about can women become presidents, you need to keep this value in mind. The concept of freedom. Can Christians be Christians in a Muslim land? Can Muslims be Muslims in a Christian land? I don't like the term, but just hypothetically, okay? Can people choose the religion they want? Can people worship the way they want? Can you build a house of worship according to this value? So those are the values that inform your decision making on daily basis. Freedom, responsibility, justice, honoring contracts. Whether the contract you have with a business contract, or the Katb al-Kitab, the marriage contract, or a citizenship. When you become a citizen of a land and sign on a citizenship, that's a contract that you have to honor. What about an ambassador signing in to a specific country, like the ambassador Christopher Stevens? He flew to Yemen. He gave his papers to the president of Libya. He accepted him in as the ambassador of the United States of America to Libya. That's a contract. It has to be honored. You cannot go out and kill him or jail him, because that will be a violation to the contract you have just signed. Are you with me? So keeping contracts is one of those values. Every form of contract. Honesty is one of those ethical values of Sharia. People are presumed innocent till proven guilty, and people have to be honest when they present their cases. Trustworthiness, tolerance, and forgiveness. According to Imam Al-Izz bin Abd Salam, those are 8 values that govern the ethical system of Sharia. So he went beyond the 3 values of Imam Ibn Qayyim. According to Al-Izz bin Abd Salam, tolerance is one of those values that Sharia would espouse. How do we live those values? When we live by the legal codes of a specific society. What do I mean by that? Now, within every society that you are a part of, you have to enforce justice, you have to honor your contracts with your neighbors, with the businessman from whom you buy a car, you have to be responsible, you have to be honest, you have to espouse, you have to live your freedom but allow people to express their freedom as well as forgiveness. So this is how you live that legal code. Some that legal code is called sometimes urf. Urf is the acceptable practices of a specific society. Urf is considered one of the sources of Sharia. So we take our sources, our rules from Quran, as I will say later, from Hadith, but also from Urf. So the society of which we are a part is one of the sources of legislation, if you will. And therefore one has to honor one's own Urf, one's own society. One's own society. What about if my society does not honor justice? One must not honor that kind of law. So if my society does not honor justice, and in the urf of my society they don't honor justice, I don't honor that legal code. Am I clear about that? So those are the values that govern how good citizen I am. By establishing Sharia values, again I say values, not law. But this is really the essence of this whole argument in the last few years about Sharia. Establishing not Sharia law, but rather Sharia values. What are the Sharia values? Those are the Sharia values. Now one would ask a question. I'm sure you know Imam Rauf, who published a book called What is Right with America and What is Right with Islam. This is the summary of his book, where he says that when you really study Sharia, when you really study Islam, when you really study the Constitution of the United States of America, you don't see 2 contradicting documents. You see documents that honor the same values of forgiveness, trustworthiness, justice, freedom, responsibility, tolerance. So do I want to establish Sharia in America? Yes. What does that mean? I want to enforce those values of freedom that are the same values that America is proud of. What do those values become? The set of self-governing regulations that govern or inform the life of a Muslim, spiritually, socially, politically, financially and economically, in terms of civil law, personal relations, and food and eating habits. So Sharia covers all of this, from how I pray 5 times a day, to how I do social justice programs, to how I enforce justice and the need to enforce justice, the need to ensure security. Now, how do you go about the details of how you enforce justice how you make sure that there is security is the work of what? Of not Sharia. Sharia does not tell you how you enforce justice. Sharia tells you how to enforce justice, not how. Now, who decides how? It's the Shura. What is the Shura? The consultative exercise of a people. Imam Muhammad Abdu would say those who are elected to power are the ones who would decide with consultation how to enforce justice, how to enforce security. Sources of Sharia. So from where do we derive these teachings on justice, on social justice, on security, on equality, on marriage regulations, on tolerance, on forgiveness? Number one, from the Quran. So there are verses in the Quran that speak about the importance of justice, the importance of tolerance, and the importance of forgiveness. And so are hadiths, statements from Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace. Something I need to make here, I said, dalil qat'i or nassi. What do I mean by that? This is something we discussed earlier when we did the Quran and Hadith. As we read the Quranic verses, depending on how you interpret the verse, you might end up with two different understandings of that verse. Based on your understanding, number one, of the language, number two, the socio-political context of that verse, number three, your understanding of the relevance of that verse to your daily experience, number four, how Prophet Muhammad himself understood it, number five, how Muslim scholars throughout ages understood it. Put all of that together. So you don't just read the verse and say that's exactly what it wants. You have to look into its history, into its language, to decide how it becomes a source for a value in Sharia. Ijma' is consensus. When there is absolute consensus between Muslim scholars worldwide on a specific value, on that becomes a source of Sharia. Qiyas, historical cases from Islamic jurists or the early generations of Islam. That is to say, you end up with a challenge now. Whatever question. Can Imam Hendi, can we participate in the local elections of the city in my town in Frederick, Maryland? It's a question. How do you answer it? You go back, look into to see if the Quran has something to say about that, if Hadith has something to say about that, or if there's something historically discussing that reality, or if not, if there's a consensus on it worldwide, and if earlier Muslim scholars discussed that issue in any way, shape, and form, that might be close enough to give you that judgment. Or, as I said, public practice and istihsan, what looks easier and better. What looks easier and better. That is to say, Sharia is not meant to make our lives miserable, as many people think, including Muslims. Sharia is meant to make our lives easy, comfortable, and wants you to live at ease. The way sometimes I see Muslims asking God, alhamdulillah, I did not learn Islam from some Muslims. I would feel I want to run away from some Muslims sometimes. Islam is this amazing and beautiful religion that wants my life to be easy, to be better, to improve, to grow. Some people want your life to be so restricted, so difficult, so tough, to the point of saying, why am I even living? Do you get the point? So this is the sources of Sharia. Now we come to the concept of maqasid al-Sharia, objectives of those values. What are the objectives that Sharia want to achieve? To safeguard the faith, to safeguard the dignity and the honor of the person, of the human person, to safeguard the wealth, to safeguard the mind and the intellect, to safeguard the land and the environment. That is to say, Sharia scholars who discuss Sharia matters use those 5 objectives as number 1 most important lens through which they evaluate whether something is happening by the teachings of Sharia or not. Does it help safeguard the religion, ad-din? Meaning, does it help safeguard your right to religious practices? Or not? Safeguard your dignity as a human being, your honor, your right to accumulate wealth, your right to think, and to protect the land. So Sharia has, one of its objectives is to protect our environment from possible destruction. These are the 5 objectives that have historically been known. Recently, so many Muslim scholars added what I have put in red, justice and freedom. This has been added as the 6th objective of Sharia, that it cannot be Sharia binding, it cannot be by the teachings of Sharia if it does not meet the value of justice and the value of freedom. If it does not contribute to freedom, if people are restricted in their freedom, then it must not be according to Sharia. It has to contribute to people's right to be free and to justice as well. Now, foundations of ethics and laws. When we legislate, what do we need to keep in mind? Rahmah and compassion, as Imam Ibn Qayyim said, as I said earlier. Moderation and balance, tawazun wal-i'tidal. It cannot be in accordance with Sharia if it is extreme. I cannot legislate a law that makes things out of balance. I can, for example, legislate laws that would prohibit people from marriage. People could do it. I cannot legislate laws that would say, okay, you know, Washington, D.C. will have no access to water for a month. That's the extreme. Justice, adl, equality and equity, accountability. So any body of laws and ethics has to take into account accountability. People have to be held accountable by earthly law and by divine law, if you will. Collective interest. So you cannot legislate laws or ethics that do not take into consideration the collective interest of the people. But at the same time, that does not take into consideration personal needs. There has to be a balance between the needs of the society and the needs of the person. You can only govern, you cannot only legislate for the society at the expense of the individual, or for the individual at the expense of the society. Is that clear? A shura and public consultation, that whatever laws you legislate or ethics you come out with have to take into consideration people's opinions, like referendums. What do people think of what I'm about to do? For example, in the state of Maryland, it will be put on the ballot in a few weeks for election. It's called the DREAM Act. With the DREAM Act, Governor O'Malley signed into law recently that, I think exactly what they are called in that DREAM Act, sort of like illegal immigrants or not
Children.
undocumented children of immigrants have the right to in-state tuition in colleges and in universities. Now it's going to referendum. Now who is deciding on it? It's the shura. It's the public consultation. It's the people who decide. And whatever comes out of that legislation has to take into account the personal needs of the individuals, but also the collective interest of the society, like in this case, the state of Maryland. You have to take into consideration the overall interest of the state, of the people, of the land, of its peace of mind, if you will, but also the personal needs of the individuals living in that state, and the rule of law. Foundations to keep in mind as we move forward: the following things must be taken into consideration in Sharia. Different needs of a human being. That people have different needs that might vary, and therefore you have to take into consideration the different needs of people. What do I mean by that? I'll give an example. Let's say that I am sick, and the only medication that is available to look after my need has pork ingredient in it. That's my own need. The law cannot legislate something that to prevent me from taking care of my body, even if it has pork in that medicine. So the state of Maryland cannot legislate a law that says no matter what, you cannot use pork ingredient in a medicine, if that law actually protects my personal interest. That is an example. People have different needs, different desires, different hopes that have to be taken into consideration. Different environment may demand different needs. So the needs of the society in America might be different from the needs of the society in Saudi Arabia or in Pakistan or in the Arab world or into Africa. And therefore, legally, you think differently from society to society. You have to be ready to adapt to new realities with honor and integrity. Different circumstances may demand different needs, As I said, well, an example close to that, in Islam, Muslims are not allowed to drink alcohol, okay? Or they are told you can't drink alcohol. What about if I'm dying, and the only available mean to protect me is to drink alcohol? Islam says it's okay, because different circumstances may require different solutions. General guidelines. Goals do not justify means. Goals do not justify means. So, for example, in self-defense, you cannot go out and kill children. An example. Even if you feel by killing those children, you are defending yourself. Am I clear about that? Yes? Knowledge must be translated into action, otherwise it will be obsolete. Spirituality must contribute to ethics and behavior. So don't talk about being a Muslim, you have to live Islam. It's not enough to say Islam is a religion of peace. You have to translate that faith into action in the way you behave with people around you. In terms of how ulama or Muslim scholars defined those rulings, they said rules are divided up into categories. Some are haram, prohibited. Some are halal, acceptable and lawful. The statement that comes out, some of you already know this, some of you don't know. Fatwa is a word that defines the attempt of the scholar to make sense of the question. Mufti is the person who gives that fatwa. Qadi is the judge. Any questions before I really want to move forward? Any questions up to now? Any questions? I want to do this. the principles of the lawful and the prohibited. They are principles that govern how an imam or a Muslim scholar would say to something, whether it's allowed or not allowed. The basic asl, meaning the text, refers to the permissibility of the thing. What does this mean? Islam would say, or Sharia would say, everything in life is acceptable. There's nothing in life that you cannot do, unless and until there is a text that makes it prohibited. So, Imam Hendi, can we drink alcohol? Yes, we can. Yes, we can, because it's a natural thing to do. Yes? Unless there is a text that says it is otherwise. Because we have a verse that says it is otherwise, we move from the asl, from what is naturally acceptable to what is unacceptable. Yes? Are you with me? Imam Hendi, can we listen to music Islamically? It's a question people ask all the time. Naturally, yes. Now, do we have a text that moves it from what is naturally acceptable to being unacceptable? Meaning, do we have a verse in the Quran, or do we have hadith that say it is haram? Now, after that, we fall into the trap of interpretation. Often the interpretation has verses or hadiths that are ambiguously translated or interpreted. What do I mean by that? The Quran itself tells us that its verses are made of two kinds. Are you with me? Are you with me? Some ayat are called muhkamat, which means a clear cut, very clear meaning of what they mean. There are verses that are mutashabihat, which means what? Ambiguous, meaning they have different interpretations to them. So this is where we have different schools of thought. How do you interpret a specific text that may have 5 meanings to it? That's where we end up with schools of thought. That's where we end up with Hanafis and Shafi'is and Malikis and Shia and Sunnah and so many schools of thought. Now, sometimes people use hadiths that are not authentic to make fiqh rules. So what do Muslim scholars do? They try to judge the authenticity of that hadith, whether it's actually acceptable even to look into as a possible base for us to say something's halal or haram. Another problem. There are what's called circumstantial hadith, meaning where the Prophet, peace be with him, was speaking about a specific reality called khas. That reality cannot become am, cannot become general ruling. In that context, I refer to the hadith that all of you ask about all the time about, can women become heads of states? There's nothing in the Quran that says yes or no, directly to the point. So there's no ayah or verse that says, yes, women can be heads of states. Okay? So you have, as a faqih, as a alim, as a scholar, you have to dive in and make sense of the text to seek solution. But let's look into hadith material. There's only one hadith that refers possibly to that subject. And it says, لا يفلح قوم ولو أمرهم امرأة. Such a nation will not prosper if they give their leadership to the woman. What do we do? There's hadith that says a nation will not prosper if they give their leadership to a woman. So some Muslim scholars who are called by Imam Shatibi, the author of this book, Al-Harfiyun, the literalists, who took that hadith literally, and you see, women cannot become heads of states. And they ran with it for so many years. Now, historically, so many Muslim scholars studied that hadith. and they came up with two possible scenarios. Interesting. One scenario, that this hadith is actually unauthentic. And since it is unauthentic, meaning the Prophet never really said it, how can you create such a rule, just as important as whether women can or cannot, based on a statement we cannot 100% authenticate and sign on? So they said, since it's not authentic, throw it away. I'm going to go back to look for another asl. I'm going to go back to look for another text. Okay? The other scenario is no. They said the hadith is authentic. The Prophet did say that, but it is khas. He was describing a specific woman who belonged to a specific tribe in a specific incident. Since he was speaking about a specific individual, it cannot become am. Meaning, in American legal study, it cannot be taken as a precedent. And therefore, it must not be used as a rule, a general rule, for the Ummah worldwide. So now you have these three schools of thought. The literalists, who did not look into the context and made a rule out of it, or the other schools of thought, the two of them, both of them, who said, yes, women can, because this hadith either is unauthentic or a specific, cannot become general. What one would you use? Obviously, it is about that specific reality, that specific community, and how they understand that text, or how people can debate it publicly. Now, Imam Muhammad al-Ghazali, who died 13 years ago, I believe, wrote about this extensively. Imam Muhammad Abdu, 100 years ago, wrote about this extensively. So many scholars recently wrote about this, and I happen to adopt their school of thought, their interpretation, that number one, this hadith is either unauthentic or specific, and therefore cannot become asl, cannot become a point of preference for my ruling. Okay? Then I find refuge in specific texts other than that, that would prove that women can, such as in the Quran mentions the story of Balqis, a just queen, wise leader, who consulted with her people, ruled with justice. She was wise, she was intelligent. And I said, well, if the Quran mentions the story of such a person in a very positive way, isn't that a possible indication from the text, from that asl, that women can actually be heads and leaders? Number three, in our history, we know of specific women who actually were in power, such as Shifa bint Ubaidillah, who was the commissioner of the market from early days of Islam. She was the head. She was like in nowadays politics, the minister of commerce or marketing. Why am I saying this point? Because the argument of the literalists, women cannot have leadership on men in general. So you mentioned this story. Here is a woman. She was in charge of men. Actually, when you read about the story of Shifa bint Ubaidillah, they say that the inhabitants of the market of Medina would shiver if they knew that Shifa was coming through. She was tough, strong lady, and she put things in perspective and was able to revolutionize the whole system of Medina. Here is a woman in charge of men. Doesn't that speak loud? Here you have the story of Balqis, you have the story of Shifa, and the lack of the presence of a text, again, of an asl, that literally to the point says women cannot become head of states. Because of this rule that fuqaha and ulama agree on, that everything is allowed unless you have a very clear cut text that says otherwise. this applies to all lively matters, whether marriage or food or politics or anything you can imagine. There was someone raised her hand or his hand. What is the last question?
My question is, the anauthentic means not sahih? You say anauthentic,
Yes, not sahih, yes. In the science of hadith, you have what is authentic, sahih, what is unauthentic, da'if, and you have fabricated what was attributed to the Prophet, mawdu', that the Prophet never said. Any question? What's the time now? 8, and we'll conclude in 5 minutes before we have a questions and answers. Sorry? 8:05. Yes, sister.
what if you're living over here?
Speak louder.
Suppose you're living over here and it's just one of the rulings here for women who wear hijab, you wear whatever color you want, or, for example.
Yes, sister.
And now the ruling in Saudi Arabia is that you wear black, majority of the women, the culture over there. So when in a world like ours, where the world is so small and we travel and we back and forth, as a Muslim, what do you follow? Do you follow what you follow when you live, and then when you go there, you respect their laws? How does that work?
My understanding, as I said, the change of rules with the change of circumstances. We don't live in Saudi Arabia that is separate from Pakistan, or Pakistan that is separate from America. We live in a small world where we have to be ready to adapt to new realities, even may come up with new understandings that do not contradict the 8 values I spoke about earlier. This is what matters. As long as it does not contradict the 8 values of Sharia, then you are in a safe haven. That's number 1. Number 2, as long as it does not contradict a specific nas qat'i, meaning clear-cut text. So come back to a specific question about dress code. Do we have any specific clear-cut texts about whether the dress should be white or yellow or black? No. And are those colors matters of culture or matters of religion? We go back to that point about the change of rules with the change of times and circumstances, and even understandings. Did the Prophet say so because he was an Arab? Or did he say so because he wanted to legislate for us as Muslims? You see the difference? A huge difference. I made the argument that I made before, that the Prophet in his time did not have forks to eat. Now we do. There are people who claim now that the Prophet never used pork. We should not use forks. Okay, you see the argument here? I say the time has changed. Time has changed. And therefore our understanding have to change. At the time of the Prophet, he used to clean his teeth with the miswak, that piece of wood called miswak. At that time, people did not have toothbrush, did not have toothpaste. Now we do. You see what I'm saying? Time has changed. We have the means, better means to clean our teeth with. So the argument is, did the Prophet wanted us literally to use the miswak? Or was it what is called in fiqh, this whole book in Arabic, I know, 600 pages is about what's called the illah, the reason for why something became halal or haram. Why did the Prophet tell us to do something or not do something? So did he tell us to use the miswak because he wanted us to use that specific piece of wood? Or was his illah, his reason, for us to clean our teeth? You see the difference? Are you with me, sister? That's the whole argument. The literalists will take it literally and say, no, I have to have that piece of wood always with me to always clean my teeth. And it's their right. This is their understanding of the text. I personally disagree, but I give them the right to think so. Others would tend to say, no. Let us take the illah, the reason, the cause of why the wisdom, if you will, the wisdom of why something was intended to be exactly that. So this book is called Towards Realization of the Higher Intents of Islam. The higher intents. So instead of reading the text literally, let us read the spirit of the text. Are you with me? The argument we made before so many times, some of you are sick of me because of it. When it comes to testimony in court, it used to be that we needed 2 women, 1 man. Is that to be taken literally? Or is that to be taken metaphorically? You have people who take it literally and it's their right because the text says so. Some people say no. Based on this concept of higher intent, based on this concept of illah, we have to understand what is the text really trying to tell us. What was it trying to address? The argument of so many Muslim scholars, such as Justice Aftab Hussein, I mentioned him before, and so many people who write about the subject now, is that the verse, meaning the text in the Quran, is speaking about issues about which women were asked to testify, matters they did not know much about. So their testimony was less valuable, not because they were females, but rather because they were less experienced. So that's what Imam Ash-Shatibi, the very well-known scholar in the fiqh, in the Maliki school of thought, calls. He says, without understanding the illah, without understanding the spirit of the text, we will never understand the text itself. So, if the issue was an issue of experience, can we change the rule? And therefore go to the court now and say, the testimony of a female is equal to the testimony of the male if both have the same experience. So Angela and Nazir, both of them went to Georgetown University, to the School of Foreign Service. Both of them bachelor's and master's degree in the same field. Both of them were consultants in the same office at the World Bank, inshallah, at the World Bank. Those who are looking for a job at the World Bank, if no one here, if one works at the World Bank, let me know. I have someone who looks for a job. Okay? Okay? Are you? Okay? Now, you have the same experience in every way, shape, and form. Why would we go to the court and say, Angela, I'm sorry, your testimony is not as important as Nazir's because he's a male and you're a female? Justice. If there's no justice, it's not Sharia binding. Okay? So if it's an issue of justice, and the intent of Sharia is to enforce justice, it does not matter whether you are male or female, but rather whether you are experienced or not experienced. In the American court system, they call it what? Expert witness. Exactly, yes. Expert witness. That's what I'm saying. Can we understand the intent of the text and be ready to change our understanding, not change the text? See, some people think, oh, are you changing the text? Are you changing the ayah? I'm not changing the ayah. I'm reinterpreting, reconstructing the text based on the language and the illah and the reason and the cause and the wisdom and the essence of the verse. This is why we would have 2 schools of thought, the literalists and those who are more metaphoric and willing to go into the higher intent of the text. Am I answering your question, sister? Yes? Is that clear? Does that make sense? You can debate me, it's okay, I'm not Mr. Man, yeah? What do you think of what I just said? Anyone want to tell me what you think?
I think that's correct. I think you should use your own reasoning. Look at the text, use your reasoning, your common sense, and rely on the principles of the Sharia. Justice, compassion, mercy. I think you'll arrive at your answers. And to think that God would care what color your hijab is, I mean, how can you not find a conclusion for that? It seems to me to be a very rhetorical question.
I wanted to make a statement earlier that I will put something on my Facebook maybe later this weekend about it. The statement in Arabic and I'll say it in English. نعيش في أزمة لأن التاريخ أصبح دينا وأصبح الدين تاريخا. We live in a crisis because history has become religion and religion has become history. Let me repeat that and interpret it. We live in a crisis. By the way, this applies to Jews and to Christians as well, trust me. Because religion has become history and history has become religion. What do I mean that? Specific examples. Specific historic narratives, specific historic experiences that may have existed in the 9th century or the 11th century has become sacred, more important than the sacredness of the text. And therefore, what Imam so-and-so said in the year 1492 in Constantinople or in Istanbul becomes more important and more used than the verse itself, even when it contradicts the verse and the hadith itself. It's very, very problematic. So history, the text has become history. It's a book that was revealed 1400 years ago, and people no longer go back to it to understand the higher intent, the spirit of the text. And rather look into 1400 years of historic experiences without being ready to ask the question, is this really history or is this really religion? Is this culture? Is this really religion? Give you a specific, there's so many examples, especially when it comes to gender issue. I dare to say, in specific communities, I have come to hear that you cannot mention the name of a female in public. It's considered haram, and people tell you it's haram. That is a specific historic context where people felt it's shameful to mention the name of a female in public. And with time, the word haram, what we mentioned about the principles of the specific judgments, haram and halal, what is prohibited, what's lawful. Because it was declared haram by a specific culture, meaning wrong, it has become religiously haram, and therefore imams rule by what so-and-so said in a specific historic context as if it was sacred, as if it was the verse revealed from the Quran, from God to Muhammad through the Quran. Are you with me? Give you an example. This one might make you laugh or cry, you don't know. A man we all love dearly as Muslims, called Imam al-Bukhari. We love him so much. We will continue to love him. Imam Bukhari used to judge the narrators of hadith by specific rules and regulations. So, if Imam was seen, this is hamburger, yeah? Eating hamburger, walking on the streets of Georgetown between Healy and White Gravener, she would be considered by the rules of Imam Bukhari of the time min khawarim al-muru'ah, that it devalues your conscience, your morality and your ethics to be eating while walking. In his time, that was the urf, that was the general understanding of the society, that you just don't eat while walking. On the basis of Imam Bukhari, he rejected some hadiths from people who were eating publicly while walking. I'm not saying he was wrong, by the way. He was judging you by your public standards and your respect of the public general interest and collective identity of the society in which you live. But come to the year 2012. For Imam to be walking from Healy to White Gravener eating hamburger, no one would say this min khawarim al-muru'ah, it devalues her honor. It brings her down, it's immoral, and no one would think that way. You see where I'm coming from? Imagine if someone, and people do it, use the rules of Imam Bukhari that existed 1200 years ago to judge you and me in the year 2012. That's where history becomes religion. Meaning, when historic experiences become as sacred as the religious text of the Quran and Hadith, and religion becomes sort of irrelevant. The text becomes irrelevant. With that, there are so many practices that I dare to say, are they really Islamic? Meaning, are they based on the asl or based on a historic context? And by the way, this is the war between the literalists and the reformers in the days in which we live. What school will win? The debate at the end of the day. If we need to win a debate, is it the literalists or the reformers? Is it the people who want to look into the spirit of the text or the literal meaning of the text? Is it the people who only focus on the spirit of the text or the facade, the outer look of the text?
Or the powerful will use the text for their own interest. Isn't that what happens in the end? Those who have the economic and
of course,
political power, they'll interpret the text for their own benefit. So doesn't it boil down to that?
Yeah. In so many ways, I agree with you. Think of Vatican II. We are in a Catholic institution. We can say something bad about Catholics. Sorry for Catholics who are here. You know, Vatican II, I just finished studying more documents about Vatican II. And I say, could Vatican II have included more documents? It could have. But the powerful in that council did not allow more than what the powerful wanted to become a part of Vatican. So come to the year 2012, an Islamic Jurisprudence Council in America, or in Saudi Arabia, or in Pakistan, or in Egypt. You are right. At the end of the day, it's that people in authority, what they think they need to push forward or not push forward, and what kind of interpretation. Unfortunately, it becomes exactly that sometimes, yes. And sometimes it's more than that. It's who's paying more money for you to say what. That's another dilemma in all religions. In all religions. Yeah. And sometimes which statement has more support, more vocal voice. Yes.
Okay, like maybe an issue that always comes to find like the problem with getting married to multiple women.
Multiple women.
Yeah.
Multiple sister. I am married to only one, and I debate that sometimes. See, I wish I could marry half a woman, you know? Okay.
So this is where I think, like, for us as women, like, we are believers and we see it in the text, but also we feel that probably it's unfair somehow. That, okay, I don't want my husband to get married to like another woman. So how would I look at it? So I can have my own interpretation, but I don't know if this interpretation is right or no. But I know, like, already in the text it says like within marriage. So it's already saying that the justice does not happen. So how would I interpret this, let's say, to Americans?
Yeah. Well, in America, again, we spoke about the urf. The urf in America, the general rule in America, is a federal law that polygamy is illegal. End of the story. And therefore, Islam would honor the urf of the United States of America. End of the story. This is not my interpretation. This is the interpretation of Muslim scholars of the Fiqh Council of North America. We have to honor the urf of the United States of America. That's number one. Let's go back to other countries where polygamy is practiced. The problem is solved in 2 seconds. How? You, before you marry your husband, you sit with him and say, honey, it's okay with me to marry, for you to marry more than one woman. What? I know you want to do it. I know. Okay? If you give him that consent, you have to pay the price for it. Either way. Islam says you have the right on that marriage contract to say he does not have the right to marry another woman. You see? So the problem is solved. It becomes your choice whether he marries more than one or two. End of the story.
Like there are some people who.
The fact that people don't do this, that's a break of the law. That's a break of the value that we spoke about, the contract, honoring the contract and trustworthiness and honesty. When I marry people, I say this word by word. It's my sister, Islam gives you the right to do this. I know in America it cannot happen, but just in case, if you both move back to Syria or to Lebanon or to Egypt, and he decides to, you want to write it down? Yes, I do. Mama, and I sign on it. Very simple stuff. Now, if you want him to marry another woman, you do that in the contract. It's really your choice, not his choice, by the way. Do people break the law? Yes, people do break the law. It's not the problem of the law, it's the problem of the people who don't know their rights. Which is sometimes the problem of the imam who does not tell the woman that it's your right. Yes, sir.
I think we're going to run out of time, but I'm sitting here listening to this and find it fascinating. And we were talking at the break about those people who will not debate you on the merits of the reality of the truth of Sharia law. I don't know if you can answer this in the time we have left, but in your opinion, how did we get to where we are? That there's clearly such fear and paranoia and Shari'aphobia, given all that you've said.
Were you here at the beginning?
Yes.
I started with that. That was my first half-hour question answer. What got us to where we are? Read Khalid Abu Fadl's book, The Theft of Islam, Wresting Islam from Extremists. And I said it's a set of realities, historic experiences, the defragmentation that happened to the Muslim empire, if you will, the centralization of power in the Ottoman Empire toward the end of the Ottoman Empire, colonialism and what it did to Islamic institutions, the nationalization of Islamic seminaries, the lack of ijtihad, the dependence on taqlid, the blind imitation of the past without allowing ourselves to think critically and ask questions.
I think I'm focused more on the last 2 or 3 years. I don't recall there being this kind of vitriol and hate in the media and lack of accurate information, unless I wasn't paying attention to it, 5 to 10 and 15 years ago.
Yes, go ahead. Speak loud, please.
There's a very active Islamophobia industry in this country. It's run by very dedicated, very well-funded people. And there's actually a Catholic International Congress report on it. And they go through the process of where the money comes in, who are these people who are funding these. In every state, there are these anti-Sharia law amendments being passed. And it all is centered around this. And then they use spokesmen like Pamela Geller and his lawyer, David Johnny, and he's very active in. So it's in an industry, and they're making a lot of money by going and speaking at events and holding rallies and these metro ads that are going on. If you trace it back, it all comes back to a vocal group of not very many, but they're very vocal.
Would you agree that it's fairly recent?
For the sake of time,
I find that's kind of interesting about
the two people who wanted to ask, we will conclude. Sure.
Do you think this is being brought on by, I would say, ignorance? I mean, you hit it earlier that most people, the gentleman that wants to burn a crown doesn't even know what the heck it says. So this is a pastor that's probably going into his congregation, spreading this to people that don't even take the time to look into it. So is that a problem that we can alleviate by education?
The last question will answer all of them and wrap up. You wanted to say something? Okay. This is a big topic, obviously we cannot discuss it, and I skipped at least 12 slides. But very briefly, I would say this. There has been an anti-Sharia movement for so many years. It has materialized and been successfully institutionalized more in the last few years than it has been. If you read Covering Islam by Edward Said, a book that was written in the 70s, he talks about all of this stuff. But this whole movement was not institutionalized, did not have the capital backing to succeed, and we did not have the social media that we have now, and the ability to produce data and information and DVDs, easily give it on YouTube and steal the file. Now it's easy to do from the basement of your home. The last thing I would say, the politicization of the aftermath of September 11. It's America was attacked by Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda are Muslims, they must be protected by Sharia, Sharia is anti-us, very simplistic, unrealistic interpretation or understanding of Sharia, or what's really happening. And they produce it to, you know, try the word ignorant, uninformed citizens of the United States of America who are easily manipulated, I go to churches every week to speak. And I have had hundreds of cases of people who say, Imam Hendi, I only came to listen to you to tell you I hate you as a Muslim. But now with tears in my eyes, I love you. You made me fall in love with Islam. Why? Because they were under the impression that Islam is bad, we are here to convert the Christians and Sharia overcome America and change the constitution. That's what they hear. The moment they see a Muslim, they speak with a smile and gentleness, who knows Sharia, what it really, really is, knows the Christianity, knows America. Wow, what, I did not know this. Thank you for informing me. So this is really the dilemma. It's people who are feeding on the ignorance of people and the uninformed citizens of the United States of America, and who are able successfully to mobilize bad images of bad Muslim practices in Muslim countries to say, this is what Islam is. Give an example and I'll finish with that. When there was a march of 40, 50, 60 people in the front of our embassy in Benghazi, that was the image of Libya and of Islam. How many media outlets covered the real story of thousands of Libyans crying for the death of Christopher Stevens? I was in Egypt, actually today. I received an official fatwa that came out from the Kuwaiti Islamic scholars on what happened in Benghazi. The fatwa was condemning the killing of Christopher Stevens, calling it un-Islamic, contrary to Sharia. From Kuwait, that was signed by Muslim scholars in other Muslim countries in Gulf states. No one covered that story. So despite the fact that the majority of Muslims objected to the movie, but also objected to these crazy nuts in Libya and in the front of the embassy in Cairo, that was not covered. So the image became Muslims go out and kill their ambassadors. You see where I'm coming from? And people accept that. We, the citizens of the United States of America, must have a clear agenda. We will never allow ignorance to overtake our imaginations and our attempt to live as fellow citizens with everyone around us. Number two, you fear that which you do not know. I tell American, the non-Muslim American, please find it within yourself to reach out to Muslims, to visit with them, to get to know them. You will know people whose values are not really different from the values that America espouses. The very last point, I told you what Sharia is. It's about justice, keeping one's contract, freedom, intellect, working together, unity, environment. Are these values that are strange to America? Yes, I love Sharia. I know what my challenge is to Christian America and Jewish America. Walk around in Washington, D.C. with a t-shirt saying, I am pro-Sharia. Because Sharia is not anti, actually it is Sharia that is, you know, I know we have to finish, but really I have 1 minute, but, you know.
10 seconds.
Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second successor after Muhammad into the Muslim community, established what was called the fund for the building of churches, where he went out collecting money for churches to be built, for Christians to feel the freedom of having Christians, of having churches worshiping in them. Got me? And he considered that one of the dictates of Sharia, to build churches. So I say as an Imam, and I finish with this, I love you, whether you are Jewish or a Christian, because Sharia tells me to love you. I protect your right to worship with a cross of David, the Star of David, or the cross, because Sharia dictates that. I protect the right of the children because Sharia dictates that. This is not an emotional statement. I work with everyone around me because Sharia dictates that. But you and me have to work together to go around and tell those Islamophobes and Shari'aphobes, don't fear something you need to love. Because Sharia dictates on us to love. Thank you.